All right, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our psychology PhD program information session for UC Berkeley. Once again, my name is Santiago. I am one of the graduate student services advisors here in the department, and sharing this presentation with me, I'm excited to introduce my co-host for the evening, Sebastian Franck Love.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Kai. Pleasure to meet everybody. Yeah, I'm Sebastian. I'm a second year PhD student here at Berkeley Psychology Department. I'm currently in the clinical science area. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about like my research interests and everything else that has to do with the program. So hopefully I'll be able to give you guys something that'll help you in some way, shape, or form without this throughout this process. So yeah, pleasure to meet y'all and excited to talk through some things.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sebastian. All right. And if anyone has any questions throughout this session, please feel free to add them into the chat. Sebastian and I will have some time at the end of this information session to go through those questions with you all. So feel free to put them in there. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So as like a agenda overview of what's going to go on this evening for those of us that are calling in Pacific Standard Time. First, we're going to talk about, is a PhD the right fit for me? I'm going to show y'all a resource that we actually have on our website called the Decision Tree. We're also going to go over the psychology PhD program as an overview, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about the admission cycle for fall 2026. Yeah, 2026. And then we're going to talk about being a competitive candidate in our program, and then we're going to have some time for some Q&A. For folks that are interested in our clinical science program specifically, I want to let y'all know now at the very, very end of this information session, Sebastian is going to go through a little bit more information about clinical science and the training opportunities that folks that are interested in that area would have to go through. All right, so making the decision, starting with the big question. I want to go to grad school in psychology, and you're asking yourself, why? Is it to do therapy? Is it to do research and teach? Or is it to do a little bit of all of these things and more, right? Some things to consider are, what is my GPA from my undergraduate institution? For some folks that are applying as international students, you have to do a little bit more depending on the country that you're applying to. And if you have questions about that, we can talk in a little bit. Something that is outdated on here is about GRE scores. I'm letting all of you now know that for the fall 2026 admission cycle, we are not requiring the GRE. So you do not have to submit GRE scores in order to be considered for our PhD program. If you have taken it though and you want to submit them, that is absolutely fine. We do something called a holistic admissions approach, where if you do submit your GRE scores, that will give a little bit of consideration if there are other factors in your application package that has the admissions committee for your specific area thinking like, oh, is this a good fit for this student? So just wanted to give that disclaimer. And then research experience. Do you have any research experience? Because that is something that our faculty are really looking for a successful PhD candidate or PhD student in our program. So other things to think about, right? There's all these different programs that you can be involved in. You could do a PsyD. You could do a master's program first before the PhD. You could do things like uh, MFT, marriage and family therapy, get a license for that. LCDC as well, which is the quickest route to become a therapist. So these are certain programs that you can consider as well if your main focus is wanting to do therapy. If you are really interested in research and you're interested in teaching as well, becoming a professor, PhD offers many different avenues for you to do in terms of a career. And we have different areas of learning that are outside of clinical as well. We also, if you're considering doing clinical work, teaching, and doing research, a PhD in clinical psychology, it is the hardest to get into, but that is something that you absolutely would want to consider if you want to do all three of these things. And then also considering an educational doctorate as well, if you wanted to go into something like counseling or educational psychology, right? Um, and then you also want to think about your specific topic of interest when you're thinking about any PhD program. We really want to specify throughout this information session that the more you kind of know what it is that you want to research, the better it's going to look on your application package. All right. So I'm going to move on from this slide, but I'm happy to share the link to this as well. I'm going to reference it again in the future on our website. All right, so talking a little bit again about career. So, thinking about what a PhD student is going to do after they get their PhD, a lot of it is research. Um, Lab and field experience is super crucial in a PhD program, with the emphasis of you becoming a scientist. And I actually want to pass on to Sebastian, who can talk a little bit more about how crucial research is when you're thinking about a career in psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better than the way that Kai expressed it, especially for programs like UC Berkeley, programs that are really heavy and have a structure that focuses a little bit more on clinical or scientific research related to psychology. They're going to really emphasize the need to have individuals that are within a space in which they can be competitive and productive as a scientist, as well as engage in whatever other part of the PhD experience they can do, whether that's teaching or I'm sure a lot of you are trying to or thinking about applying to the clinical area, where whether it's clinical work or anything else that's involved with the process. But I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to be able to, at the very least, delineate why you think you can be successful as a scientist engaging in research, as well as the other parts of a PhD, especially in a program like UC Berkeley. But it's not, it's not isolated just to UC Berkeley. Any of the probably top psychology programs will have the same thing. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Sebastian, for sure.
Mm.
And on top of that, building on that, other careers that would be considered for folks that get a PhD in psychology or a PhD in general, exposure to a career in academia, teaching is something that you would absolutely be doing. A lot of times we also have students that graduate from our program that go into industry. So for those of you that don't know what that actually means, it means going to places like Google, Facebook, AI, working in museums, working in nonprofits, and really using their research expertise to amplify the work that's being done in corporate, nonprofit, in the arts, etc. And then for those interested again in the clinical science program who want clinical experience, you would be able to do therapy. Okay, so just a little bit more facts and figures about our psychology PhD program. We are STEM designated, and that's mostly important for our international students. The psychology PhD program at UC Berkeley is designated as a STEM program as of 2018. As of this year, UC Berkeley Psychology PhD program was ranked number one graduate psychology program in the United States, according to the US World and News Report. On average, our program does have about 750 to 1,000 applicants per cycle. I can say with confidence, last year's cycle, fall 2025 cycle, we had about 800 applicants, with 4 to 5% of them receiving an interview and 2 to 3% getting admitted. I don't say that number to scare anybody. I just want to be realistic that there's not that many spots available in the PhD program. Um, and then it gets even more competitive when it comes to clinical science because we get the most applicants for that area with a less than 2% acceptance rate. And that's again because of the amount of faculty that are accepting students per year. All students admitted into the program also are guaranteed 10 semesters of funding. And so that is something that the student services advisors, the graduate student services advisors, would work with you and your faculty advisor on to ensure that you have that guaranteed funding. All right. So I'm going to talk about the 6 different areas that we have as research areas in our program, and starting with the behavioral and systems neuroscience area. This is based on neurobiological and physiological bases of behavior, including, but not limited to, circadian and seasonal rhythms, decision making, sex differentiation and behavior, energy balance, and animal spatial orientation, and navigation, among other topics. And I'm going to pass it back to Sebastian, who's going to talk about clinical science.
Yeah, of course, if you haven't noticed the pattern, anything clinically related, I will be the one talking about it, but also some other things. But just to focus on clinical science, this is an area that is really focused on translational research. And so, what we do here is we are really looking to understand and address human problems. And so, both faculty and students, any type of research or work that we do, what we do, we're looking towards understanding the foundational mechanistic processes like emotion regulation, sleep, social functioning, cognition, temperament, reward processing, race, culture, anything. But the goal of looking into those, areas and work is to advance both scientific knowledge and clinical applications. Something that you might have noticed as I'm listing all of those different things is that clinical psychology can cross multiple areas and domains. And I could probably tell you that almost all clinical scientists do so. But there is the, pivotal point of the work being translational in some way, shape, or form. And that's what makes it clinical science. Back to Kai.
Thank you. Yeah, so talking about cognition next, it's an area that focuses on behavioral and computational analyses of cognitive processes. So cognitive models and empirical methods are used to address the components of the mind within the cognition area. And so now that we know a little bit more about neuroscience and cognition, mix them together, and Sebastian's going to talk about cognitive neuroscience, or what we like to call cogneuro.
Yeah, so cognitive neuroscience is an area that's very specific to neuroimaging and neuropsychological methods. And what they mainly do is that they try to look at the neural bases of human behavior. So they use a lot of the same techniques that neuroscience uses individually. So MRI, EEG, to study brain mechanisms, but they do so to identify underlying cognitive processes. So it's a little bit less towards the like completely, neurological side of things and more on the mechanistic cognitive side of things. So yeah, back to Kai.
Yeah. All right. So the next one is what I feel like is a little bit more comprehensive to explain developmental psychology to me. Well, not to me, in general. It studies how the organism and its capabilities really develop through the lifespan. And that's really all I got to say about developmental psych. It's pretty straightforward. And then the last one we have is social personality.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that pretty much covers developmental to a T. I mean, it's pretty simple, but it can expand. A social personality is an area that looks at how people are influenced by others and how we interact with other people. And so there are a lot of topics that it spans across, but it usually has anything to do with variables or any type of stimuli that you would identify that's interpersonal in nature or a processy that's interpersonal in nature. So things like social influence, personality development, social context of behavior, they're usually intersecting somewhere between there. But yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Sebastian, for helping me explain all these different areas. Now we're going to go into what the normative timeline of the psychology PhD looks like at Berkeley. So, in year one, you would go through your course requirements. We have that all listed on our website. That includes taking teaching psychology, learning how to teach the course content that you would be doing to undergraduate students in this program. It would include taking, within your first year, the psychological statistics data analysis course, among others. Then you would also be taking your research course, Psych 299, which you will see across the entire time that you are a student at or in our program. You would also be doing a little bit of grant writing or fellowship application writing in conjunction with your faculty advisor. And then you would also be going through academic student employment, or you would have your admissions fellowship, which would give you the time and the space to conduct your research. Then in your second year, you would be finishing up other coursework requirements that would include taking topical seminars, pro seminars if they're offered as well. And then you would also take your research course and prepare for your qualifying exam, which we encourage all students to finish before the end of their second year. Some students actually take it in their third year, but we really try to encourage students to get it done so that they can do something called advancing to candidacy. So, students in their first and second and third year until they move on to candidacy are called PhD students. Once they are advanced, they become PhD candidates. And that includes forming their dissertation committee. So they'd be working on that in their final years in the program and preparing their dissertation proposal. This is their end product that they're going to come out of this program with that really solidifies them being a doctor, right? Um, so, like I mentioned, some students are taking their qualifying exams later. A lot of clinical students do take it in their third or fourth year. They do their dissertation proposal and they're still doing their Psych 299 research. And then in their final years, again, they're writing their dissertation, and clinical students actually take their final year in the program to go on internship. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later for those that are interested. But for now, um, we're back with Sebastian talking about more clinical science.
And so clinical science, although it's a part of the psychology department as a whole, it's an area that is probably the most different from all of the others when comparing to the rest of them. But one of the main things is that it's the most popular area. I've seen this across different programs, almost every place that I interviewed and got an offer from, they've gotten pretty much the same amount of applications, and it just keeps getting higher and higher. Usually at the top spaces, there's less than a 1% acceptance rate. It's the same here at Berkeley. So we've got an average of 1 to 5 students that gets accepted, with five being the rare time or the rare number that gets accepted. Usually it's somewhere between 1 to 2. But we just happen to have like some new faculty coming in, which is usually a reason why people accept more students than normal. One thing that's super important to understand is that Berkeley's clinical science program is PCSAS accredited and not APA accredited. And that's been true since 2020. Now, what this means isn't that you can't engage in any type of clinical work, or that your, I guess, certification after graduating isn't the same as when you are APA accredited. PC SAS is something that's more science-centered education. And so while it does, it designates what the type of training every student that goes through that program needs to consist of. And so it's really trying to build what we call clinical scientists. So people who try to contribute to the advancement of public health and extend scientific knowledge to contribute to mental health care. You still get clinical training, you're still able to be a clinician, see patients. We do so pretty much the exact same as APA students or APA programs. But PCSAS allows for there to be additional requirements for programs to be more research focused in terms of the types of training that they have. One thing that I want to make sure that I point out too is that all of the seniors that are, I guess, fifth years or people who were applying for internship have gotten their first choice internship application spots. And so they're on the track to be certified the same as everyone else. PCSAS was a little new before, but now it's being more recognized. So there's no separation or differences, at least in terms of what licensure means. But PCSAS does differ in terms of rigor when it comes to research training. And I think the top 20 clinical psychology programs are all PCSAS. Berkeley just happens to be one of the ones that got rid of APA accreditation because they were requiring some other things. Yeah, probably talked a little bit too much about that, but then within clinical science, you engage in heavy clinical training all the way from years 1 to 4. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but yeah, it kind of progressively gets more intensive, and you start to separate from the university to more outside spaces. And we have a program manual that Kai is going to link into the chat that's going to give you the most up-to-date information about our area within the psychology PhD program. So please download that. That's going to give you a lot of, I still look at it like every month or so just to make sure that I'm on track to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do or that I'm not missing anything. Yeah. So that's the gist of clinical science. And obviously, we'll talk more about it later.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sebastian. So now we're going to talk about actually applying to our program, right? So when thinking about sorry, give me 1 second. Mm. Okay. So, when thinking about the timeline, you all are in this information session and you're doing it so correct right now. Applicants should be gathering their unofficial transcripts, letters of recommendation, and information about that is found on our website as well. They should be drafting their personal history statement as well as their statement of purpose. We ask for two written statements from all of our applicants. The application actually is going to open the first week of September on the graduate division website. After all of this screen sharing is done, I'm happy to share the links with you all, but I do want to let you all know it's not public knowledge yet, so everyone in here is getting this information just like you're welcome. Our application closes on November 17th, 2025. And that is for the fall 2026 cycle. I will be offering office hours weekly on Mondays throughout the fall semester leading up to when the application closes. So if there's ever a moment in time where you're like, "Ooh, I have this burning question and I like need a response," you can either email us at psychgradadmissions. We'll share that email later, or you can come to office hours with me. Then in the spring, you'd be getting an interview invitation at the end of December, and then interviews will be held towards the end of January. And then decisions are due from our accepted students on April 15th. So that is the whole timeline of everything with admissions for our program. In terms of coursework requirements, we actually do not have a set number of courses that we require our applicants to have in order to apply to our program. But I will say a preference is given to anyone who's taken introductory psychology, general psychology, as well as research methods and statistics courses. Advanced coursework in the area you're applying to is really helpful. So, for example, like we see listed here, if you have any cognitive modeling courses that you've taken, if you're applying to cognition or cognitive neuroscience, that's great. If you've taken psychopathology courses for clinical science, it's also great. And another example is if you've taken any classes on emotional regulation, if you're applying to social personality, that's also a great example. So, next, degree requirements. So, for us, degrees in biological, cognitive, or social science are often closely related to psychology in our graduate program. However, a bachelor's or a master's in psychology are actually not required for admission into our program. Um, and with that being said about a master's program, we actually don't offer one. We don't offer a terminal master's degree for those that are interested in our program. It's only a PhD that we offer. Only clinical science students are required to obtain the master's along the way to their PhD, and not any other area is required to do this. However, it is an option for students that want to get the master's on the way to the PhD. So, when it comes to filling out the application, what I have come across is really prioritize the faculty advisor that you're going to be applying for. So, for example, here, if you're really interested in working with one of our newest faculty members in clinical, Jasmine Brooks Stevens, you want to indicate that that is your primary faculty that you want to have as an advisor. But let's say you're interested in maybe clinical or you're maybe interested in developmental. So in the application, you would put your secondary faculty that you would want to work with. So, for example, if your first choice was Jasmine in clinical, you would put down that Celeste Kid is your second choice for developmental. And the reason why I mentioned this is because when our faculty are kind of sorting out the applications, there are certain times where a student is going to put down, oh, I'm interested in working with Aaron Fisher, and he's in clinical science, but I really want to get my degree in social personality. Aaron does not teach social personality, right? So you really want to make sure you're paying attention to the faculty and the area that they are a part of. Okay. Next is funding tips. So this is something that I really think is going to be super important for all of you to look at even before coming to Berkeley, because there is a lot of free money out there that a lot of people want to give away to brilliant students like yourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and link this first. Um, thing in the chat. So this is the UC Berkeley Graduate Division's graduate fellowships, grants, and awards page. It has up-to-date information about funding opportunities for you all to look at prior to starting your PhD journey, but these are specific to Berkeley. Um, or these are the different awards that we um, offer to students through graduate division. There are some external fellowships on there as well, but if you really want to have a good amount of resources related to funding, um, I'm happy to share this because it's within the UC, but this page right here, it's called Grapes. Please don't ask me why it's called Grapes. I don't know. But it's a wonderful database that you can actually use to filter eligibility, citizenship status, the amount of money that you want. And this is a great funding tool for you all to utilize, even if you apply to our program or others. This is just a wonderful resource for you to take advantage of. Another thing that I want to mention is talk about funding early if you have the opportunity to with your potential faculty mentor slash primary investigator or PI, as we call it. Um, because at the end of the day, if a faculty member really, really wants you, they're going to really want to make sure that you're having conversations about what funding opportunities that they have for you. And as a student, you want to make sure that you're weighing all of your options, right? Something that I also want to mention is that student services, which is me and my co-graduate advisor, we share funding opportunities to our psychology graduate students. So as a psych student, if admitted, you would continuously get as many resources as possible in our program shared with you. And also, I love this graphic of this check with this young Berkeley bear. All right. I'm going to pass it back off to Sebastian, who's going to talk about final things to consider when applying to our program.
Yeah, absolutely. Kai did a great job of kind of listing all the things that you should be thinking about or looking towards or creating a list of questions to ask, potential faculty mentors before you apply. And the final steps, I think, that are probably the most pivotal is understanding that a lot of the psychology areas and faculty members and programs that you're applying to are going to be very competitive And the norm is, as opposed to something that's abnormal, is folks applying multiple times to the same program and to multiple programs. So for anyone that's applying for the first time, second time, third time, fourth time, whatever the number may be, if you do not get in, we highly recommend you applying again and also looking critically at the areas of experience that you have and comparing it to the career path that you're applying to. And you want to be really intentional about this. But one thing that has been, at the very least for the last 5 years, a norm is that most folk have a certain amount, at least 2 years of research experience. Most of the time, that's through a post-bac program. They have fellowships out there, research assistantships, or a lab manager position. And that's usually working in a research specific space with a lab that's somewhat affiliated in some way, shape, or form with the type of space that you would like to apply into. Programs, especially Berkeley and Berkeley faculty, really love to see the fact that you're engaged in work that one shows that you can engage and be successful with intense and heavy research, but also that the research interest that you're, claiming to want to build a career off of is something that you are actually interested in. It gives you a chance to develop your research interests, and you want to, like I said before, align your research, um, I guess, experience to whatever work that you want to do with the faculty member that you're applying to. And the last part of this, and we can talk more about this later, of course, I would absolutely suggest reaching out to any faculty member that you would apply to. I would not expect for them to answer. They are very busy and they get a lot more emails than graduate students. I get a lot of emails, so if I can't even imagine getting twice as much as that. So it might be difficult for them to respond, but it does not hurt to introduce yourself, state your research interests, and to let them know that you're applying so that they'll recognize your name and see your application in the big pile that they'll get from whatever. It will never hurt you to do that. But another thing that I'll do is also that I'll suggest is to contact the current graduate students that they have. That's probably one of the best things you could do. One, more likely to respond, and two, they'll be able to give you a good idea of what life looks like as a student, where faculty can only give you the perspective as a faculty member. Yeah. So that's all I'll say regarding to this.
Perfect. Thank you, Sebastian. So with that said, we are now gonna jump into questions. So I have already seen some questions come through the chat, which is wonderful. I actually think one of them we did answer that I said we'd talk about in the Q&A. What year do students begin clinical work? I think Sebastian talked about that beautifully. And that is during years 1 through 4. Um,
Yeah.
anyone ha need any expansion on that?
Yeah, feel free to unmute for if anyone has like a statement or question that's relevant to that one. Yeah, it might make it easier than throw it in the chat.
If not, I do see that we have. To what extent does having an MS in clinical psychology, along with prior professional experience as a clinical psychologist, strengthen an application for this program? Um, yeah, I mean, just to start off, if you already have had professional experience as well as research experience, I think that's what faculty are really looking for. Um, you already have a strong application for this program. And Sebastian, feel free to add on.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think that having the MS in clinical psychology is going to clearly identify that you've at least engaged within the space. Now, I want to make sure that I express, because I've seen a lot of people go through this route, is that your application to any program, but especially the ones here at Berkeley, is going to be based on your fit with the faculty member that you're applying to. So, whether it's professional experience or clinical psychologist experience, whatever it is that you're doing, while your experience as a clinician will be seen in a positive light, be more, it will not be weighed heavier than your research experience. For example, I was a clinician before. I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling beforehand here. That was I almost got zero questions about my clinical experience, because one, they knew they would be training me as a clinician here, but also they were more interested in what type of work I wanted to do as a clinical scientist. So while it's definitely helpful, I don't want anyone to leave here thinking that if you're applying to clinical psychology, that your clinical work is going to make you, have to have less research experience. Your research experience and your interests and how you can show yourself as being a fit, whether you have more or less research experience, you want to make sure that you identify, like, yeah, I can do this work. I'm confident in doing this type of work. I'm confident in being successful working with this person. And this is why. As long as you can say that, I think you're in a good spot. But I wouldn't rely on clinical experience in itself to carry you through. Yeah. Hopefully that answered that question.
Thanks, Sebastian. All right. So the next question that I see is you mentioned that funding is guaranteed for all students for 10 semesters. Could you clarify whether students also need to apply for specific funding sources during that time? So it's not necessarily a need to apply for other funding resources. It is an option for students to do so. What we do guarantee for 10 semesters at a very minimum is you will have an academic student employment position through what we call the graduate student instructor, or a GSI. So you're guaranteed to GSI for 10 semesters. However, if your faculty nominates you for a fellowship, there's a potential to receive a fellowship either from the university, from the chancellor's office, from the department itself. But that is contingent upon nomination from the faculty that you would have as an advisor. And these other opportunities that are given to you for funding as resources, they are supplemental, right? You can also work more as a reader or a tutor for certain courses that may need a little bit more help. And the courses that are taught or that you're a tutor or reader for, they are undergraduate courses. So hopefully that answers your question. You do get the guaranteed funding. It is through a teaching position, but the extra supplemental funding opportunities, they are provided for you to apply to. All right. Um, can you please share the criteria for international students regarding the application? So, what international students have to do to apply to the program is the exact same as domestic students. And what I'm going to share with you here is a link. I'm going to just share it with everyone. This is our webpage that shows you all of the requirements to apply to our program. They are all exactly the same, whether you are an international student or you're a domestic student. All right, I'm going to scroll up a little bit. How can I get more information about a faculty member's lab if they do not have a lab website? Any advice on how to find out more about their current projects or who the current graduate students in their lab are? That is a very good question if they don't have a lab website. Sebastian, do you have any insight on that one?
Yeah, the only reason I would see a faculty member not having a lab website is if they were very new and they haven't established a lab, which would make sense. One thing I would do is identify if they have a personal website. That's number one. Number two is identify any papers that they've written, starting from the most recent ones. So I would start with most recent papers that they published, and then also their most cited papers. That's going to give you a good idea of one, what their general research area is, and two, what they're currently working on. Um, as far as like graduate students, that's probably one of the main reasons why faculty members make lab pages. So if they don't have a lab page, they probably haven't really like established anything with their lab with their like graduate students. So you probably want to focus less on that. But any faculty member that's doing any type of work at any reputable, research focused institution will have a lab page at the very least. And if they don't, they're probably new. And then they'll make one at some point, at some point in time. But if they're new, that kind of gives you a better chance because they need graduate students. They need people to engage in the work that they're doing. So that's kind of a good thing. But everyone else should have a lab page. If they don't, I'd kind of be looking sideways at them any way, shape, or form, because that's the best way to communicate what you're doing to the public. So, yeah.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you for that, Sebastian. The next question that we have is a question that I feel like is so important to everyone. Where can we find information about faculty, which faculty are accepting students for 2026? So I'm actually collecting that information right now. Faculty are currently on vacation. They are not checking their emails as often because it's the summer months. And so that information is going to be made available on our website by the first week of September. Now, I know that this is a little like it creates a little bit of a riff when you're thinking about who you're applying to be with, whose lab you're applying to be with. But what the way that I see it is if they're a faculty that you're really interested in applying to, and you do see that they are accepting students at the very beginning of September, you're well on your way. You've already collected all of the information that you need to apply to the program. If they are not accepting students, that just goes to show that they don't have the capacity yet. And then, um, you know, I'm gonna have to see you at another time. Or if there's a secondary faculty advisor that you really want to work with, a third faculty advisor that you want to work with, and you see their name on there, wonderful. I really, really hope that for anyone that is applying to our program, that a secondary or a third faculty mentor that's accepting students is going to be listed on there. And I will say last year we had over 20 of our faculty members that were accepting students. So I'm imagining on average the same. Okay. Next question is with all the funding challenges happening in academia lately, I'm wondering if there's any risk of funding for this program. I've noticed some programs are pausing admissions, so I'm curious if there's been any decisions about that at Berkeley. I can say with confidence that none of our programs are pausing admissions. Absolutely none of them. And so I'm uh, confident that y'all are good. We're going to be fine. If I'm from an R2 institution, how impactful would that be towards my application? So, with understanding like R1, R2 institutions, right? It's research focused. I want to reiterate what Sebastian said earlier. If you have a lot of research experience, really highlight that in your application package because that's what we're really, not me personally, what faculty are really looking for when they are considering people to interview for admissions, when they're considering which students they want to take on in their lab, right? Do you have anything to add, Sebastian?
Yeah, no, I'll just point out that's it's a I think a very pertinent question, especially within this space. I would say that the institution that you have come from only plays a role as it pertains to the type of experiences that you've been able to have, or the type of resources that you've been able to have. Everyone is looked at as an individual. No one's looking at anyone from a certain institution or working with a certain type of space, saying like, oh, automatically this person is better or not. It's more about what you've done and then how your fit is. So regardless of where you've come from, if you have, experience and you have skills and you can delineate those things in a way that impresses people, you're gonna get invited in regardless. But coming from an R2 institution, I'd imagine that the resources available in order to do some of those things might be limited or less. And so, if that's the case for anyone, I would highly suggest noting that in somewhere in your application and saying, hey, look what I've done despite all of the things that I haven't had. Imagine what I could do when I got more things, But your job is to basically sell yourself as someone who can do the work that you're saying to doing. They're not trying to get you in as a student. Like no program is trying to get you in as a student. They're trying to make you professionals. You're gonna work for the institution, you're gonna work for the program. So they want to know that you can do the things and you're gonna represent them well. So you're essentially saying, I'm good at what I do. I just haven't had enough things. So I wouldn't focus too much on the R1, R2, more on your skill set, your abilities, and what you can actually say as it pertains to both of those things. So,
Mhm. Thank you, Sebastian. I feel like that really answered the next question really well, too. How deep should we go into the terms of research ideas, themes, and projects for the statement of purpose? Exactly what Sebastian said, right? You want to ensure that you're being detailed as much as you can within that word limit, but you're also really highlighting those key things that you've done. What have your deliverables been if you've had them, right? Make sure that you really highlight that in your statements that you write for the faculty. All right, so the next question, what opportunities for certifications, minors, or concentrations are available during the clinical science program? I have a cognitive background and an MPH and very interested in pursuing more coursework in biostats and modeling as part of the breadth of my training. So what I really appreciate about our program and what you would discover working with your faculty advisor is if you have different interests and you really want to focus on them, as long as they're in alignment with what you talk about with your faculty advisor, they're going to encourage you to seek out the knowledge from other disciplines that are at Berkeley. I know of students that have taken courses in public health. I know students that have done certifications in applied data science. I know some that have done things in biology, integrative biology. So, as long as you're in communication with your faculty advisor and you're making it known to them, like, hey, I have this interest in this, they're either going to say, absolutely go for it. Actually, most likely they're going to say, absolutely go for it. As long as you're, hitting your marks, you're doing your coursework, you're doing what you need to do with your research projects. There's a plethora of opportunities, I will say.
Yeah. And I'll just add one more thing to that. There's this thing called the designated emphasis that Berkeley offers. It's basically almost like a minor for undergrad, and some other spaces within PhD programs also call it a minor, but where they have specific programs that focus on different areas where they'll tag on to your PhD diploma. And then, of course, you have to engage in different types of coursework and you have faculty members and stuff. Not very many people do it. But if it's something that you feel very strongly about and you think can enhance the work that you do, absolutely is an option. But everything else Kai said was absolutely correct and to the point.
Thank you. No, and I love that last point as well. Thank you, Sebastian. Um, may I know the application situation for the social personality program? It's the exact same as all of the other areas that we have. So we talk a lot about clinical science because we get so many students that are interested in clinical science, but I promise you, developmental cognition, cognitive neuroscience, everything else, the application is all the same. Please talk about the role lived expertise plays in the selection process. So, kind of like what Sebastian and I were saying, right? In your statements of purpose and in your resume and your CV, you're going to want to highlight as much as you can related to research and related to the field that we have, the field of psychology. Like I had mentioned in the very beginning of this information session, the faculty go through something called a holistic review of everyone's applications. They're looking at every single element that you're putting into your application package. So, with what you've done and your expertise and the different roles that you've done, list it if you really feel like it's been significant and impactful, and why you want to be in a psychology PhD program. Absolutely write about it in your statement of purpose. And, the best thing I can say is don't lie about anything. Just be 100% who you are and talk about the things that you feel like are important and that really matter to you, so long as it's in relation to the research and the work. I'm going to move on to the next question because I know we have about 9 minutes left in this session together. So, does the master's degree GPA hold more weight versus the GPA of the bachelor's? That is actually a very good question. In the application, there's actually a question about cumulative GPA for your undergraduate institution, but it also is going to ask about your advanced GPA. Advanced GPA is essentially taking the GPA or the grades of all of the courses that you've taken within psychology or within your master's degree, and you're going to put that in your application as well. Whether it weighs one more than the other, again, holistic review, they're going to weigh everything together. They're going to weigh in your statement of purpose. They're going to weigh in uh your the other one, the personal history statement, sorry. They're going to weigh in GPA, letters of recommendation, CV, resume, all of these things. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and I'll say to that really quickly because I think it's a really good question.
Mhm.
Um, for as far as like the differences in a GPA, it's a like an it depends question. The main thing is you explaining or you identifying why that's pertinent. So let's say, for example, like for me, my undergraduate GPA is a lot lower than my master's GPA. I had like a 4.1 in my master's program. Undergraduate was like a 3.3. I was able to identify a reason why my undergraduate degree GPA was lower, and then said like, "Hey, look, when I locked in and did what I know I could do, this is what my GPA was afterwards." And it can be done vice versa. So it's really a chance for you to identify and explain anything that might be a negative, but you want to like showcase like I can do rigorous work. Um, this is not representative of my abilities, and this is why. And that's why it's holistic in general, because sometimes your personal statement can do that. Sometimes your statement of purpose can do that, or any other piece. GRE can do that for sure. So you really like be intentional about what you use and what you submit and what you say about them, because that's going to help people understand what your actual situation is instead of them assuming, oh, they have something low here, or so this doesn't look good. They must not be a good fit. So that's it.
No, that's real. Thank you, Sebastian. And thank you for being vulnerable as well. I appreciate that. Um, The next question is, how many years of research experience on average do most applicants have prior to the PhD program? I will say, just like as a something general that I've seen, there's going to be about 2 to 3 years of experience, research experience for those that apply to the PhD program. So Sebastian put up two fingers. 2 to 3 is what I see.
At least 2 years. I don't think I've ever seen anyone jump into this space with anything less than that. And it's usually more, but 2 years of an official position. So, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Next question. Can I apply to a PhD program directly after receiving my undergraduate degree? You can apply to the program while you are finishing your undergraduate degree. However, if you are outside of the United States, email Site Grad Admissions because there are certain requirements from UC Berkeley that make it so that certain countries have to do like a undergraduate degree and then a master's degree because that would be equivalent to a 4 year bachelor's degree in the United States. So um, just email me and then we'll look into it together. Is there a preference for applicants with a major in psychology? Would coming from a different academic background significantly lower my chances of being accepted into the program? I don't think so, personally. I feel like, yes, it is great for students to have a base knowledge of psychology in their undergraduate studies, but there are times where people are applying to this program and they get in with a major in biology. I know someone that double majored in Spanish and they got into the program. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a bachelor's degree in psychology, so long as you can demonstrate that you have research experience, really, really and truly, that's what it is. We're going to keep driving that point home is have the research experience before going into any psychology PhD program. It's going to really set you up for success. I see a couple of questions about statement of purpose and statement of personal history. Um, you know, the best tips that I could give you, I kind of gave a little bit earlier, but if there is significant experiences that you have had, particularly related to research, that you can highlight in your personal statement, as well as your story of who you are, that is going to be the best thing that you can do. And Sebastian, as someone that just, finished writing these statements not too long ago, do you have any last tips?
Yeah, no, for sure. Exactly how Kai said, I think you want to make sure, I mean, like I've said pretty much the whole time, you're very intentional about what you say in each one of those. Your statement of purpose is more aligned with what you plan on doing and how you feel like you're a reputable or competitive applicant for that space. Your personal statement, it's not completely personal. Like you don't want to just kind of throw up all of your personal history that you think is connected. But I think it's a great opportunity for people to give context as far as, yo, what makes me interested in this and what else do I think is helpful in terms of why I'm gonna be good in this space. So I would really, if you feel like you have something personally that would make you seem like you're more uh like being in this space is more, it makes more sense. I would take advantage of that completely in the personal statement. But the statement of purpose needs to be like, yo, I've done this. This is what I want to do. And this is what this space has given me. Now I'm missing this. I think I can get this from this person or this space or whatever. Like you're being more matter of fact and laying it down. Personal history is a great opportunity for you to kind of give more context, make you seem like a human being.
Yes.
Now, if you're a really good writer, you could do that in the statement of purpose too. But I wouldn't play around with that if you're, anyway, iffy about it. So yeah.
Mhm. Perfect. I know we are running close to the end, but I do want to answer these final questions before we jump into the last thing for those that are interested in our clinical science area. But first, this question, do we have to write in detail about our second and third faculty we want to work with in our SOP? You don't necessarily need to write in detail about these faculty members because in your application, there will be a portion where you will write down why you want to work with these faculty members as well. So you can kind of choose what you want to do with that. But I would say maybe write about the secondary advisor and then utilize the application to talk about that third faculty member that you might want to work with as an option as well. I did share the 2 pages for cognition and cognitive neuroscience. So if you want to check out those links, that has comprehensive information about both those areas. And then thank you all for all the affirmations. We've loved having you. And then this question, I would like to know whether cold emailing professors is an effective approach. As Sebastian said, yes. However, you're not guaranteed a response. So we do recommend you reach out to current graduate students in the labs that you are interested in being a part of as well. Since we don't know which faculty are accepting students, when do you recommend reaching out?
I
Um,
can, yeah, I can take this one. This one is a really good question. One thing that I think is really good is emailing faculty to ask if they feel if they're taking students. Sometimes they let the department know a lot later than when like, they actually know. So it's never a bad thing to be like, hey, I'm emailing you, really interested in your work. I was wondering if you're taking students. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is my CV. I'll be applying. Hopefully, I'll be able to talk to you soon. And then leaving it at that, and usually they'll respond saying, I'm taking students or I'm not taking students. So that's a great way to like throw yourself in there without it feeling as much as like a cold, email or whatever. So yeah, for sure.
Amazing. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much for the session. Just going to share again
Yeah.
our email, sitegraduadmissions@berkeley.edu. And for those of you that
Yes.
are sticking around, we're going to share a little bit more about um, more clinical stuff.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for showing up. I wish you all the best of luck for anyone that's leaving.
Thank you.
It's a tough time, so take care of yourself. Shoot. Yeah. Mhm.
Whenever you're ready, Sebastian, you can jump into the clinical science training opportunities.
Yeah, should I wait for more people to step out or just jump in? I mean, it makes sense to kind of jump in since I guess
Yeah.
people are staying. Yeah, I don't have to worry about people leaving. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities, or we should probably call them requirements, things that you'll be engaging with when you're in any type of psychology, clinical psychology program. But this is specific to our UC Berkeley psychology program. So the way that it starts, I'll get a little specific just to help you guys kind of orient yourself. At the very least, recently in your second semester of the first year, you begin official clinical training. You start taking courses in your first semester. Second semester, you have your first client. That's usually anywhere between 1 to 3 hours a week or so. And you might do a neuropsych assessment in that first semester or that first year, which is something completely different, which you'll learn probably when you get up in there. And then the focus is on CBT, ACT, and DBT. You'll have a supervisor, weekly case consultations, you'll have the training that you need, and individual supervision. So you'll be really heavily observed throughout this process to make sure you don't feel like you're doing this on your own. Year two is a lot of the same, except you'll have more clients. And so you'll be able to see, anywhere between 2 to 3 clients during that time. Same thing, individual therapy, weekly case consultations, but you'll have access to different supervisors, which really helps expand your range of expertise. That and each supervisor has their own focus in terms of theory, which I think is super helpful. And or usually around year three is when clinical students apply for externships. So what this means is it's a step before internship, but you're applying to a clinical space outside of UC Berkeley's clinical psychology clinic, but you're not yet officially engaged in internship. And so what you're doing is you're seeing more clients, you have more hours, and this is usually in an area that you've identified as something that you think you're going to be engaged in probably for the rest of your career, but at the very least for internship, because when you apply for internship, you need to be able to show, let's say you want to do child psychology, you want to work with children, adolescents, and let's say you want to do DBT, you have to be able to show the internship space like, hey, I've done this work before. I've done this many hours. I've got this letter from this person that's seen me do the thing. And so you really, by the time you get to your externship space, you're really kind of focusing a little bit more on what you think your clinical interest is. But you're seeing more clients, you have less coursework. Usually, hopefully, you're teaching less. And so a lot more of your time is with actual clinical work and seeing patients. And so you're basically just research, seeing patients, maybe a little bit of teaching. You shouldn't have very many classes. Year three. And that gets a lot more exacerbated as you move forward. So year four is a lot more of that. Year five, people are usually preparing for internship, dissertation. And so that's kind of the breakdown. And then afterwards, of course, is internship, where there's a very specific process where you could be anywhere in the country, but you choose where you want to apply to, and then they choose and they rank how much they want you. So that's the general breakdown of the clinical training that you'll get. Very, very, very similar to APA. And like I said, there have been no examples or situations in which someone from PC SAS has not gotten the internship site that they wanted, and so they're in almost a guaranteed position to get licensure afterwards because it's just about hours after that. Obviously, if they don't complete their hours, they won't get licensure. But in terms of actual requirements, there's nothing keeping them from doing so. So, yeah.
Amazing. All right. With that being said, I'm going to stop recording.